just do a quick. Okay, so let me start that again. Hi, Michael Bunting here. Many of you know me, but some don't. So I'll just do a little bit of an introduction. Today's webinar is about translating behavior, which is in effect culture. Culture is a collection of behaviors, into bottom line performance, which has been our obsession, particularly the last 12 months. We thought we knew a lot, but we discovered we had a lot to learn. And I'll just take you on that journey of learning today, and hopefully you can connect and relate to it. So my quick history, again, if you've never met me or you've never seen our work, the history of 21 years in this field. And I have had a long history in deep awareness work. And then in 2015, I wrote my first book with Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. They happen to have the world's most researched leadership model, and 5 million people in their database, more independent PhD, master's research thesis written on their model, etc. It's a very solid evidence-based leadership model. We've applied it in organizations around the world, and then we evolved it into the second one, the mindful leader. The mindful leader, Kouzes and Posner's work has 5 key leadership practices, and the mindful leader, we added 2 key practices, accountability and self-awareness, because Kouzes and Posner's work is not as long-term as ours, where we're actually trying to create scale transformation in organizations and people. And then Vertical Growth, the most recent book, which I'll touch a little bit on today, answers the question of how to do the development, because it's not enough to know the technical skills. Even in the mindset skills, it turns out you actually have to know how to be self-regulating and understand what's blocking and getting in your way of your behavior change. Because we meet leader after leader after leader after culture after culture after culture that know what they should be doing and don't do what they know they should be doing. So what maintains that gap is a tremendously interesting subject, and how do we close that gap of awareness? What do we do as a business? We do these big culture change programs with multiple organizations in Australia and around the world. We've got partners that work with us around the world. We help companies become and stay best employees. We're really proud. We've managed to help a lot of clients become best employees and maintain, win awards basically. We support senior to middle management to lead at their best through long-term programs. We don't tend to we do events, but they're just usually the warm-up to real work. And then we provide a process for team development as well at scale to actually embed values through a whole organization. And then we research, measure, keynote speak, facilitate, coach, and consult on the what and how of great leadership. So that's the quick introduction. What are we going to cover in this webinar? So we're going to look at measuring success of leadership or HR programs, because when we're looking at leadership and culture, it also applies to a lot of different HR interventions and HR programs. We're going to look at the how of culture improvements, fascinating subject. How do you actually get the shift and change? And then introduce you to the triple goals. We're going to give you some practical stuff that will make sense to you. If you happen to be a consultant, you'll also hopefully find this useful too. Morning, Samantha. Morning, Angela. Morning, Jagal. Hopefully I pronounced that well, from Sydney. Okay, so let's begin with just the simple challenge of our industry, of the development, culture change, leadership, communication skills, etc. Any kind of learning and development challenge. Like, how do we measure success? And just if you look at the complexity versus time, the most simple measurement is what we call a level 1, which is you do a workshop, you do an event, you get some feedback, and the primary mark of success is, did the people who received the learning love it? And was it relevant for them? And if you get the tick, you've done well. Obviously, that's not even close to good enough. The second one is, did the workplace behavior change in leaders and their teams? I remember just on the first one, interestingly enough, I'll just give you a quick snapshot of this. One of our clients asked us to come and upgrade their existing leadership programs. And when we interviewed the internal team that were running those leadership programs, they said, look, our programs are life-changing. We get feedback all the time that it was a big program, it was a 1-year program, and quote unquote was life-changing. And they asked us to interview 5 leaders who'd done this life-changing program, and all 5 leaders agreed it was life-changing. But we asked all 5 leaders, so what exactly did you change behavior-wise at work as a result of the training? And all 5 were dead quiet. They had literally not translated all this learning into actual shift and change in the workplace. And our question was, of what value is that then? Might be nice for you, but for your direct reports and for the organization makes zero impact. So the question is, did workplace behavior change in leaders and their teams is the next level? And if so, that requires quite a bit more complexity and well thought out process and programs based in behavior science and so forth. The next level up is, did the behavior change reduce employee turnover and increase engagement? Or in our case, sort of get to award-winning levels. Now, as I'll show you in this presentation, we spent the majority of our 20-something years in this field measuring at level 3. And we had the assumption that if you reduce turnover and increase engagement, de facto, you will also improve performance and agility and innovation. Now, is that true? We'll come to in a minute. The higher level, now you'll see the way I've done this diagram is it doesn't require more time to create a real shift in behavior change sustainably so that it creates outcomes on employee turnover and engagement does take more time than just number 2. But number 4, actually, what we found is that, if you're measuring the levels of agility, innovation, and bottom line performance in anything you do for training development, learning development, OD, anything around HR for that matter, it doesn't take more time than number 3, so it's not a good excuse to use time, but it does take a little bit more understanding and it's a little bit more complex, as we've discovered firsthand. Now, it has been really interesting research because, again, we've had this long-term assumption that engagement equals performance. And it's plenty of research that correlates the two, but there's not causation. And when let me just pause. Let me just not show that slide before and give you 2 messages. Just focus on the camera if you don't mind. When the revered tech companies of the world, with their ping pong tables and their great workplaces and so forth, started retrenching people a couple of years ago, that paradigm of high engagement equals high performance got shaken a lot in our industry. And there was this question mark around, well, you can have highly engaged employees and actually have relatively average or low performance. So engagement's not a solid measurement of long-term performance in a business. It obviously is of things like mental health, but that doesn't equal performance. And what we've found, and many of you listening to this call, the bottom line truth for 99.9% of organizations on this planet is performance. If it's not creating value and performance, whatever you're doing from HR, it's simply not going to sustain. And this little piece of research is a really interesting one because it highlights this problem with engagement and performance. And I'm just giving you the highlight of the study in the text. In this particular study, now it's showing a trend, a bigger trend. 25% of engaged employees did less work, and 22% of disengaged employees did more work, but were at a higher risk of attrition. So you could say that in terms of output and performance and getting stuff done, that a quarter of employees who were way less engaged than the engaged employees were still performing, but the highly engaged team members were not performing. It's not or not performing as well. It's not an exact science, but it shows that there is a problem with correlating engagement to performance. And both of these data points, the 2 above, data points serve as calls to action to senior leadership to invest more into creating a culture of both engagement and productivity. And this highlights the big challenge that we have been working on, particularly for the last 12 months. And it's worth obviously considering for you. Now, just a little note, as we go through the presentation, you're very welcome to ask questions. Julian will keep an eye on it, and then there will be formal question time as well. I've always found it a bit odd speaking to a screen and looking at the chat function. Questions are quite useful that I know there's human beings at the end. So as a result, when we were looking at this, we were stuck basically, and we actually, interestingly enough, despite all our years of self-awareness work, convinced ourselves that engagement was there. That's as much as we can really reasonably be expected to move as from an OD perspective, because other things are market factors. There's so many other factors that are beyond the scope of organizational development, HR, or even leadership development, that it would be not accurate or fair even to measure performance. So there was quite a lot of unconscious resistance in us, even as a provider who've prided ourselves for years on stretching ourselves to the ultimate measurement, not just happy sheets. And interestingly enough, Alexis, one of our clients who did our program, was on the receiving end of our one of our long-term programs, commented to us at one point. I was having a chat with him, and this is a leader of 20 countries for one of our clients. He said, there's no doubt your training and discipline processes produce meaningful behavior change. It's the best I've seen, but it's unhitched from business performance targets. And that gap is where people escape. They don't do the real work, and they treat it as another HR initiative to survive. Alexis was leading 20 countries at the time. And what he noticed was, even though people intellectually bought into the content and the process of transformation and culture change and growth, there was still a lot of resistance and an easy way to excuse, escape, not measure. So Alexis began to systematically develop his own processes around our training and development to create a harder, if you will, a tighter connection between the KPIs of those people, or their performance of their areas, and their behavior, both collectively and individually. What interestingly Alexis achieved, and this is interesting because he shared us with us after the end of the program. So before our program, his region of 20 countries was losing market share for 5 years, negative sales growth for a couple of years, and the engagement was low. After applying our work with his own additional insights, they went to double-digit sales growth, the fastest growing pharma in the region, some of the best launches. If those of you not in the pharmaceutical industry, launches are a very, 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 very big deal. High quality launches, because for a whole host of reasons I won't get into. And they did some of the best launches in the industry and produced some of the best engagement scores within the whole global organization. So huge shift on performance, learning, and engagement. And what's really interesting is when Alexis shared this with me, I heard it, and I use this quote just to cue my talking point. I heard it, but I didn't hear it. It's like in fact, I remember the way I processed it was a little bit like, oh, okay, so that's excellent. So we can just trust that leaders will be smart enough, like Alexis, to use our content intelligently in their context, apply it intelligently, and we'll just get this consistent outcome on performance change. But of course, that's not true. And so this was highlighted when Alexis joined us. Apologies for my kind of somewhat cheesy slides. These are my talking points. So remember my sequence here. So what happened then is Alexis retired successfully from his business, and he moved to Montevideo in Uruguay. And then one of our global clients asked us if someone could deliver our programs in bilingually, in Spanish and in English in South America. So I contacted Alexis, and it was a lovely moment for Alexis because he's got a deep purpose-based view of life and wanted to do this kind of work we do because it changes lives and organizations in a really positive way. So he joined us. And then something happened that forced me to finally actually listen. What effectively happened is that Alexis did his program in a different region to ours, and he achieved quite substantially better results. And crucially, he achieved better financial results for this area. In fact, not only did we sit up and look and get surprised, also our client was a bit surprised and wow, okay, what's going on here? So that then took about 12.
And that was, that's.
Sorry, Julian?
No, I was just about to say that same thing. It took, how long did it take?
It took about 12 months.
To see the changes from Alexis in Uruguay, I mean.
Oh, yeah. No, it wasn't that long. It was about 6 to 9 months to start seeing the changes. But then it took about 12 months for us to decode into a scalable, predictable process back into our programs to actually systematize what Alexis had created. And it was a tremendous opportunity for us as a business because we've been so consultants, ourselves ODHR focused, that it was fantastic to have a business, a person in a huge role work with our program as a mainline business leader, and then come back and actually shift our thinking on the program. And hopefully you'll enjoy this piece right here. So what happened was, the red zone, I'm just going to share how our process worked, a little snippet of it pre this moment of Alexis, right? What happened is we would typically have a conversation with clients where we would say, what's your vision and strategy? And then we would look at how can we measure our work successfully? And it would be typically around engagement and turnover. And we've got fantastic results in this area over time consistently. We know we can increase engagement for clients, and we know we can reduce voluntary turnover, particularly when it's problematic and they're losing great people. And we know we can shift culture. We know we can help people become award-winning. And the assumption, right, we can put some financial measurements to that, right? Turnover, for example, is highly costly. We can say we saved the company X money through reducing turnover. But we had the assumption that engagement and turnover would increase agility and performance. And as I shared earlier, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's not true. And then what we would start with is we would define for clients what are the behaviors that are reducing engagement and reducing turnover, and also reducing efficiency is one of the things we would look at. And the typical things we would see and do see in all of our clients is image management, reactivity, short-term thinking, and incongruence. The incongruence is there's a difference between the talk on the website and the walk in the organization. And that incongruence creates huge problems in the culture. And that in turn reduces engagement and turnover. Post Alexis, what we did is, you'll see there's a difference between engagement and turnover into what we call the 3 keys, is we, based of all the, probably 200 to 300 hours of conversations with Alexis and unpacking exactly systematically how he did what he did when he was in the role, and what he did with our client in the Americas, we began to reformulate what we call this thing called the triple goal. And if you take the logic of it, every organization wants to deliver on its vision and strategy. In order to deliver on its vision and strategy, particularly in a competitive market, it has to be more efficient at the execution. So use less resources to get, the same level of customer service or the same level of production, so forth, so on. So in other words, be highly efficient, which equals a high-performing, waste-less culture, right? Then they also need to be a culture that learns fast. Now, pace of learning is defined in 2 ways. Is the organization seeing repetitive issues arising that stick around? That means it's got a pace of learning, a deep learning problem. And then the second thing is the organization able to shift towards its vision and strategy in the pace that it needs to? For example, some of our clients have to shift into more sustainable ways of working. Otherwise, they're basically going to either die or dramatically lose market share and profitability and size. So how fast are they transitioning into their new strategies and their transitional goals is a pace of learning measurement that you could put hard KPIs on. And then lastly, which is the one we've been really good at, is engaged associates. We sometimes call this joy at work, and it's a measurement not only of engagement, but also mental health and inclusion, all of which should serve learning, all of which should serve execution. But what we did differently and have begun to do differently is specifically define the execution targets and connect the dots between the red zone behaviors and what we call the 3 keys of the triple goal, to the extent that we would begin to look at where the organization's underperforming, where the organization is not learning fast enough, and where the organization's lagging on its engagement. And then we would specifically investigate, and we do specifically investigate and define exactly what behaviors, both in leaders and the culture, are the cause, can explain the underperformance. It takes quite some time to do this, and effort and skill, but it's a remarkable shift where the clients can now, and this is a critical thing, I think, for HR as well, where you can begin to define behavior and connect it to performance outcomes in a direct way, bypassing engagement, as an example. Once we did that, things changed quite dramatically. Now, you see that term image management. I just wanted to give you guys a quick taste of what image management's about, because it's what we call a red zone behavior, and then I'll take you through the whole process. This is a quote from Robert Keegan from Harvard. He's a Harvard University professor. It's from his book called An Everyone Culture. And the quote is, and in an ordinary organization, most people are doing a second job no one is paying them for. Most people are spending time and energy covering up their weaknesses, managing other people's impressions of them, showing themselves to their best advantage, playing politics, hiding their inadequacies, hiding their uncertainties, and hiding their limitations. So in a more simple way, it's described that especially any time the organization is maybe above 50 people, right up to the 100,000 people, people basically have two jobs in an organization. There's their actual work, and there's this whole other thing called image management. Being at meetings, you don't need to be meetings, pretending, et cetera, et cetera. And when we asked, we did surveyed about 5,000 people in multiple organizations. We asked them, what percentage of time and energy is chewed up on image management in your workplace, realistically? And we'd give them sort of a multiple choice number. The number that our research told us is 40%, right? It was actually 40 point something decimal percent, but rounding up to 40%. And it's fascinating because basically what we're seeing is that 4/10, right? 40% of the time and energy of a person's workday is wasted on image management. And if you just look at that as an opportunity to improve performance, it's extraordinary. If you just reduce image management, you can save, depends on the size of the company, millions and billions of dollars. Well, I'm not going to go into detail, but at the core of image management is an absence or a loss of integrity. And there's a connection between image management and integrity, which we explore more deeply. But it's just an interesting thing. As soon as someone's image managing, they're in some kind of dishonesty with themselves and others, but they're also telling themselves a story. This is how you survive and thrive in this organization. The more toxic the culture, the higher the level of image management. You can trace almost every single behavior that an organization is hurting performance in an organization, hurting learning, and hurting engagement to image management, really interestingly. So I'll just pause there. Sorry, and I haven't introduced Julian. I'm assuming most of you know Julian is my partner in this work and colleague, and is the technical expert around here as well, and also runs programs with me. Julian, did you notice any questions?
Yes, there are a few. So we are true. So let me
Julia,
just.
I saw Julia, the time scale for improvement. I'll show you the time scale at the end. I've got two outcome-based pieces of research I can show you, literal outcomes. But I can tell you now, it's 6 months, right? Within 6 months, you can start moving the dial literally on performance. We actually assumed it would take longer, but interestingly enough, it didn't take that long for Alexis either. Alexis managed to shift in 6 months, which is incredibly fast. And that, what we've also discovered, fortunately, that's typically about the level of tolerance the average client has for investing stuff. It's like, where's the results? Where the results are? Fortunately, it happens pretty quickly. Okay. Any other questions?
There is a question from Benjamin Feldman. How do you measure leadership behavior? How can you measure emotional intelligence, such as empathy?
Yeah. So is that Benjamin? Benjamin, we measure leadership development. It's leadership itself is what we have is the 7 practices of leadership, and it's what we call the what of leadership. And that's based off Kusis and Posen's research. So Kusis and Posen's research was originally, I think, 1,100 hours worth of interviews of multiple leaders. And it was finding out what behaviors, what specifically are leaders doing when they're achieving great outcomes, high performance, high innovation outcomes. And they formulated, it seems like there was these 5 key things that popped out of all this huge amount of data about 30 years ago. And they are leaders walk the talk, they model the way, they have a vision, they challenge the process, so they're innovative and agile, they empower others, and they encourage the heart, so they're appreciative, warm, and caring. and then subsequently research that over and over and over and over again to see, is this correct? Is this assumption, this is the core of what leaders do, and it is correct. And then in our work, we add accountability. So leaders who do really well also do 200% accountability. They take accountability and hold others to account. And they're also self-aware. So they're self-regulating is the two we've added. We've also done a huge amount of data. In our case, not as big as Cushing's person, but it might be about up to 20,000 people now we've researched. And we've connected it to outcomes like psych safety, performance, and so forth. And yes, it correlates at over 40% as well. Here's the interesting thing, though. What we've also found being in this field for a long time is that you can go to almost, 100 different sources of leadership experts, and they'll basically tell you the same thing. So, and if they're not telling you the same thing, they're not talking about tennis. It's like how to play tennis. You can get 100 different coaches and you're going to get a lot of similarities. So we've now got to a point where we know what great leadership looks like. We know the what of it. If you're interested, Mindful Leader will give you that in really clear. We've got an exact summary of that too. It's really clear, right? And Ben, no, 40% is, for example, a person's engagement levels, 40% maybe you're talking about image management. Yeah, it's funny. The two numbers are very similar, 40 and 40. Yeah, some of our clients measure up to 70%, by the way, of image management. Now, just coming back to the question of the what of leadership, those are the 7 practices, but the so what of leadership, it's like, so what? Why would I look at my leadership? Is what we call the triple goal. If you're going to improve your leadership, the so what has to be improved execution, performance, improved learning, and improved engagement or joy at work. So then that's the ultimate test. So for example, we had this really fascinating example when Alexa started working with us, when a client said, oh, I need to be a better listener. That was their leadership practice. We asked this really simple question, so what? How's that going to improve performance? How's that going to improve learning? And how's that going to improve engagement? And as soon as we asked that question, it brought a lot more technicality and precision to the leader's development practice, because ultimately, if you are working on your culture and your leadership and it's not moving the triple goal, it is a flat out waste of time. And that's, as I say, where we are now. And I think every HR intervention, every leadership intervention should have that in mind. If it's not moving the dial on those 3 things, you're just wasting time and money. Okay. I'll let you, Julian, answer the rest. So yeah, image management's a fascinating subject. Now, in order to help clients really work, it's not enough to just talk about what's not working. It is critical to talk about what's not working. So what's fascinating when we start working with clients is they typically don't want to talk about what we call the red zone behaviors. They just want to talk about their green zone and pretty and what great looks like. They don't want to talk. And there's a fascinating principle of adult development, which is what you cannot talk about, what you cannot name, what you cannot take accountability and ownership for, you can never, ever outgrow. And so we've met multiple clients and say, we've got these new values, you've got this new culture and ambition, but nothing's moving, nothing's changing. And one of our first questions would be, well, have you looked at the existing behaviors, named them, owned them? Do the senior leaders know how they play them out? Is there conversations around the red zone? And almost invariably, no, there's not. But it's not enough just to understand and name what the red zone behaviors are. You also have to understand what drives those red zone behaviors. And in organizations as well as individuals, there's beliefs, fears, assumptions, there's reward and accountability systems embedding red zone behavior. If you cannot identify these, you cannot overcome them. Just yesterday, one of our team was sharing that a client wants a high-performing culture, but they reward people's bonuses. If you don't perform well, you get 90% of your bonus, as opposed to 100% if you perform well. And he was laughing and saying, how are you ever going to get a high-performance culture if that's how your bonus system works? And he was talking about a high-performing culture he knew where the bonus system was a lot more brutal around performance. But that's just a simple example just from yesterday, that a lot of organizational reward systems actually embed red zone behaviors. A lot of the beliefs and the fears and the assumptions of what excellent looks like. So last week I was in Asia and working with a client, and we asked them, they said we have basically they declared that we have a survival of the fittest bullying culture. And I asked them, so what's the assumption? What will happen if you stop that hard kind of abusive language towards people? And they was good in that they revealed, we probably believe that we'll lose performance. So there's this fears and unaddressed issues in the organization that also have to be discussed and exposed, because they are what drive the top red zone behaviors. So despite the best intentions on a website, until you understand technically the top and the bottom, you cannot address it. You can never, ever outgrow it. An adult development principle, not adult learning, adult development, would say it's very clear. You cannot transcend or outgrow what you cannot describe and cannot name. It's what Carl Jung called the shadow. If it's in the shadow of your awareness, you've got no chance of addressing it. So that's our first part of the process. However, remember now, it's fully linked to the triple goal, so that there's much more motivation for cynical business people when they understand and can articulate the connection between behavior and performance outcomes. The number two, the pace of learning, typically is the easiest one to connect, because it's very evident. And to use the example from last week, while we are bullying and terrorizing our staff, how much learning is going on, how much unpacking, how much coaching, it's going pretty much zero. You also need to define the green zone behaviors. And what you see in organizations when you've got green zone behaviors in action, you see senior leaders role modeling those behaviors, you see rituals reinforcing green zone, and you see green zone reward and accountability systems. There's an alignment. What is fascinating, another piece of research, but for those of you who know our work, you'll know what I'm about to quote, but for those of you who don't, here's an interesting anecdote for you. One would assume that senior leaders know that they should walk the talk, right? Which they do. If you ask senior leaders, do you leaders need to walk the talk? They will say yes. But when you ask them, what's the talk you walk, right? What's your exact talk that you walk? And can you describe how that influences your behavior? Which is basically asking them, what's your definition of green zone as a leader? My experience, less than informal research, less than 1% of leaders can answer this question, which shows a lack of adult development. What's fascinating, the same with organizational values, is that very few people seem to be able to quote the values, and even less can quote how the values are supposed to influence, and this is critical, performance of the business. And that's the other thing you've got to do if you want to improve the connection between learning, development, HR, OD, and bottom line performance, until the green zone can be articulated in terms of exactly how it's going to improve execution, learning, and engagement. It remains, like it does in most organizations, a kind of, what are those values on the website again? Oh, we love our values. And then occasionally you have like a performance review. Some person has this good intention. Let's do a 50-50 balance on what's the right word, on bonus structures, of 50% values and behaviors and 50% performance. And invariably it gets applied, where it's basically, if you perform well and you sort of did the values okay, we're giving you full marks on values. And most never, and this is the point Alexis gave us, it's almost never or never does an organization have the discussion, which behaviors did you cultivate this year and how did they improve your performance? That kind of conversation doesn't happen, which is why culture remains unhitched as a core. It's, people know it's important, but is it a strategic imperative, and can you describe and can you measure its impact on performance? Typically no. And then what you also have to understand, the drivers of green zone behavior, right? And what we found is, until they are, the green zone or the values of the organization are treated as a core business performance lever, it does, basically they just stay as a nice to have and a brand management internal comms campaign at best in organizations. One of our new clients yesterday, we just asked them, so we got to this point and we're brand new in the process, and they were like, what were our values again? And I said, well, basically every single green zone behavior you've talked about so far that you need to cultivate to improve performance are basically in your values already. And there was a kind of shock, silence, and then there was a sort of hustling to go, what were our values again? And it's like, I knew their values better than them. But what's fascinating is you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel on values, but what you have to do is connect and articulate the values to performance, pace of learning and engagement, and then measure that connection and outcome. Until you do that, you're basically behind the 8 ball on the green zone as well. And then also we have to help leaders mature in their understanding of values. So it's only when they start seeing and understanding that their own image management is an absence of integrity and their own walk the talk that we start seeing this taken a lot more seriously. So this is how I'm just giving you a snapshot of our whole process. Hopefully this is useful to you. Now, a last note on, Benjamin, it does eat strategy for breakfast, but one of our clients is Swarovski Crystal, you probably know them. They were saying, no, strategy and culture need to eat breakfast together. And we actually like that quote because that makes a lot more sense to us. Now, here's the interesting piece, and I just want to give you a quick snapshot of vertical growth in our work, is we know that leaders need to walk the talk. We know that they need to be able to consciously name their red zone behaviors, own their red zone behaviors, and come back to green zone behaviors, right? So if we take an example, one of our clients has empowerment as a value. Many of our clients have empowerment as a value. And I just wanted to highlight the challenge here, right? So this is a real story from a real leader. This particular leader is not in our book, Vertical Growth. We've got 26 leaders. Funnily enough, this particular story is one of the leaders who didn't make it in the book. But this is a real person, Philippe. And Philippe is a very senior leader in a very big organization. And Philippe just could not let go of the controlling of his team, right? Technically excellent, but still not genuinely developing bench strength beneath him and developing the next generation and supporting growth and learning. And so the usual assumption is the reason why Philippe is not micromanaging is because he doesn't know how to empower. And usually the best we can give is, hey, Philippe, here's a book on empowerment. Here's how to empower. Here's the process for empowering. Now, surprisingly enough, we found that most senior leaders don't actually know the process technically correctly of empowering. However, if you teach them the process, it's very rare to see them actually change, right? So the usual result is continue micromanaging. We're seeing, by the way, the term micromanaging is a little bit old-fashioned now, I know, because the terms we see nowadays are dipping down is one term we use. We see firefighting is another term, like it's a more cool term but firefighting is basically micromanaging. It's getting down in the weeds, getting involved in too much detail. It's not empowering. It's not creating accountability. The challenge that we had a client this morning, or a potential new client this morning from Canada, sharing with us that they've spent a lot of money on leadership development training, and it's basically created zero change in their organization, absolutely zero. It's been a complete waste of money. And then they started reading this book, the book Vertical Growth, and said, now we now understand why it's been a complete waste of money. And here's the little insight, right? Is if you take Philippe's story and you ask this question, this is out of Keegan's work, and then we've got a lot more deep work of our own, to expose the mindset or the fears or the unconscious red zone that I mentioned earlier at an individual level. And if we ask, and we did ask, I said to Philippe, what do you worry will happen if you successfully empower people? And this question is designed, it's like a trick question, is designed to reveal the unconscious mindsets, the unconscious fears, and the unconscious beliefs running the person. Because no matter how many skills you throw at a person, if there's an unconscious belief or fear that they don't even know, not aware of themselves, that will keep running their behavior. And after about half an hour to 45 minutes, Philippe finally answered the question. It's a weird question. What do you worry happen if you succeed, right? That's the interesting thing. Not what do you worry will happen if you don't empower. It's what do you worry will happen if you do empower. And Philippe's answer was, it kind of came out of it, I'll become irrelevant and lose my job. Aha. So Philippe's has had this lifelong, this deep fear that if I empower people, I'll actually end up being out of a job. So despite knowing that he needs to empower people, knowing that it's good leadership, setting an intention, I'm going to empower people, I really believe in this stuff. We've seen that before. What actually rules a person's behavior is the deep fears and the deep mindsets and beliefs underneath it. And unfortunately, which is tricky for our industry, if you can't surface those beliefs and fears, the promise of change just keeps not happening. It's exactly the same organizationally. So if you can't surface the beliefs and fears and embedded invisible reward systems in an organization that are perpetuating red zone behavior, you will not basically move the dial on actually shifting those behaviors and changing what you need to change. You're effectively band-aiding a bridge that's cracking and breaking, instead of looking at the moving or shifting foundation that's causing the real issues. Okay, so 2 more slides to go. Thanks for staying with us, those of you still with us, and then we'll take some final questions. So what were the results of this work? So what's the actual data tell us? So the first time we ran this updated vertical growth program, and we were just really working on image management. We had not connected the dots to the triple goal, performance, pace of learning. We hadn't explicitly, there was still the assumption. It was very successful. We reduced 31% of image management in one of the most senior teams in a very large organization in 6 months. And we pre and post measured that, right? So basically a third of image management, which is a remarkable achievement in and of itself. And we've subsequently had multiple successes. But here's the interesting thing. At no point in this, up until this point where we're having the profit money performance conversation, it was kind of just like sitting there going, well, excellent, we've reduced image management. But I don't think we were even brave enough ourselves to ask the question, yes, but did performance, did profitability, did innovation change? And it was only when we began to actually explicitly put it in that we were able to start measuring. And then we just literally got these first results a couple of days ago, literally. So we've now been running with a triple goal as a structure for about 9 months, and in a very deliberate way. And we're starting to get the first results in. And this is a 2,000 person business, and they are putting an award submission in based on the work we've done with them. They've done 6 months of the program. They've not even finished the program, right? And it's a pharmaceutical company. And their claims, not ours, as a result of the training that they've done, they've now got the highest sales volume growth of 11 peer countries, which is a way of comparing how we're doing to like for like, right? So they've improved sales volume by 17%, which is higher than all the other like for like organizations. They've done a key drug launch, which again, as I said, is a big deal in pharmaceutical. By the way, we don't just work with pharma companies, we work with engineering companies, mining companies, media companies, telco companies, etc. as well. So their key drug launch was 400% above the original business case. One of the key things that came out of their red zone was what we call an impact without activity, and therefore not prioritizing was one of their red zone behaviors. So in the green zone, one of the key practices was ruthless prioritization, take it down from 22 to 7. And that was part of the success story and also the learning story. And then the one that we expect, but we're delighted with, is this particular client had an engagement score for about 5 straight years of 6 out of 10, right, was their engagement score. And within 6 months of this program, it's had flatline. Think about it, 5 years of flatline. It's now 8 out of 10 within 6 months. That's how fast it's lifted, which was one of the goals. Because when we set the process with clients now, we set the process of going, okay, well, what's your engagement score now? What do you want it to be? What's your pace of learning right now? What do you want it to be? And what's your performance, the big ticket performance areas you want to improve, which then creates the discipline for us. We have to basically connect the behaviors and the process of shifting behavior based on all that adult development and process we work with, which we've got down well now. Will that move performance? And we're now seeing, yes, it definitely does. And so in a sense, we're sharing this with you because it's kind of like the holy grail for our work, is that how can HR or learning or leadership or OD get a seat at the table where you really are in the business performance discussion. You're not just in the great place to work, nice place, etc. discussion or mental health discussion. And so this is now showing not only can you improve mental health and inclusion and well-being and engagement, you can also directly improve performance and profitability. Okay, so let's see if there's a couple of questions and then we'll Actually, no, I'll do the what I think one of my friends said, the commercial break, and then I'll answer some of the questions. If any of you're interested, because there's some deeper questions probably that have come up for you, you might want to, and even supported, we can support you to actually connect some of the dots in your own organization at no obligation and no fee. We can just scan the code and we can give you some of the answers to those deeper questions. Julian's put a link as well, if you're on your phone, you can fill out a little thing, and we can have a chat with you again. And we could just help you get the basis of what are red zones, what does a triple goal look like for you? Can you even express your values, for example, in terms of the triple goal? Just giving you a little bit of a clue is how to put those dots together in your own context would be an absolute joy. I mean, we're super excited about what we're seeing now and how much more disciplined the connections are, and we would love to support, especially if you're in the HROD function and you also want to create that clearer connection where your work is seen as a core strategic, every bit as important as finance and sales and marketing, etc. All right, let me get to the question. What were the specific demonstrable behaviors? Okay, so let me just pause there before I answer questions. For those of you who would like to, you head off, I'm not going to cover anything more. The slides are complete. I'm just going to answer some final questions. And thank you so much if you've hung out with us so far, for listening to my enthusiastic stories around, and also how joyful it's been to be a learner as an organization, because we're always learning, but we kind of thought we really knew our stuff, and we had it all together. And Alexis really shook the foundations of the whole way we consult and look, and it's been an incredibly rewarding journey, like going on a learning journey ourselves. And interesting to see how even myself was resistant, even though I was hearing it, I wasn't hearing it, and how common that is for us, our clients. So I'll hear what we're sharing with them and not hear it. And sometimes you have to take 6-7 bites at the apple, for it to finally actually get heard, right? Thank you, Richard. Lovely to hear from you, Richard. Thank you. Okay, so let's see if we've got any questions to answer. Julian, did you?
Yes, there is a question from Angelique Zamit. Angelique, if you don't mind, maybe speaking up and sharing your questions about the triple goal. I don't know if you're there and available.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome,
Hi,
yes.
Angelique.
Hi, everyone. Wow, this is very deep. The stuff we're talking about, which is great. I was interested in. I can understand somewhat the triple goal, but in terms, say, for example, efficient execution, there's so many variables there. You spoke about continuous improvement, lean and mean, and all that, but it's not just that. And I just wanted to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so we've handled the triple goal in two ways. It depends on the client. One is where we just literally put a top line performance target to it. So in the client that we highlighted at the end, the one with the data, the triple goal was simply a 10% growth in revenue, which was higher than it had been historically, right? We wanted 10% growth, and now that's still a year, so we're 6 months into it. They're well on track. What we found, though, in the that was nice and clean. In the trickier client examples, what we've had to do, and this has been very, very interesting, is we've identified the underperforming areas in their business, particularly the larger clients. So, and this is crucial. What we find when we begin to ask clients where are the underperforming areas, there's an immediate blame in the market. So the typical story goes like this, and you've no doubt seen this, Angelique. Where our business is performing well, it's because of us. And where our business is not performing well, it's because of the market. That's the typical story, the image management story that happens. And we see this, it's like exhausting. Every time you ask a client, so where are the business challenges and where your business underperforming? It's always, the market and the conditions and so forth. Where you're performing well, we've done this great stuff ourselves. So what we have to do firstly is help clients name, which takes some maturity, to name the underperforming areas that are just simply underperforming because of them, because of the way the organization is running itself, all right? That can take some time, but we will get there. And then we connect that underperformance to specific behaviors in the leadership group, normally the senior group. And so it's a kind of culture leadership group, and then invariably back into the CEO, and then invariably back out to the senior group. And it's hard to describe how freaking obvious it is. I mean, I was 2 weeks ago, I was I was overseas, I wouldn't say where, but we were working with a professional services organization. And it was remarkable how clear it was. There were particular underperforming areas of the business. The collective red zone behaviors that they connected were not the sole cause, but a big cause. Because we're not claiming that the red zone behavior is the sole cause of the underperformance. There could be technology systems, there are multiple other things that could be part of it. But the thing that we highlight and stress to the client is that when you're looking at business improvement and improving your results, invariably you look outside of your own behavior. So the average leader will go, okay, I need to improve business performance. What can I do? The last question I'll tend to ask is, I wonder how my behavior is getting in the way of results. Or a question we ask is, what's my part in this? And in this example 2 weeks ago, they were able to very quickly name the collective red zone behaviors that were connected to that underperformance. And then, surprise, surprise, that red zone collection set of behaviors was almost a carbon copy of the CEO's red zone collection of behaviors. And that's where you get the leverage, right? Where we're not claiming, this red zone is the sole cause or the sole responsibility of performance, but we are backing that it's a leverage point for the client where they can get substantial lift and improvement. And it needs to be disciplined, right? Where it's actually directly tied. So the way our process works is we'll revisit that 7 more times over time with this relentless accountability learning process, where if the red zone behaviors are not moving, you'll invariably find the performance is not moving. When the performance starts moving, you see the red zone behaviors moving, but there's this constant coming back, what we call the ritual, coming back to looking honestly and owning where the red zone behavior is still stuck because it's a learning issue. So that's what we've seen, and hopefully that answers your question. That's what we've seen in practice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Julian?
Not that I see, no.
Okay. Cheers from Canberra. Hey, Neil. All right, I'm just scrolling to see if I can see any other questions, and I can't. If you have a question, thanks, Benjamin. If you have a question, please do to share. Otherwise, I think I'll wrap up and just to share that our original, and I'll just if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, by the way, you're also welcome to. Where I post a lot of stuff around this. When we started our business, it's just a heartfelt share as we close. When we started our business, our deepest care and concern was a more integrity-based, conscious, compassionate world. That was the whole why of our business. It was quite something for us to really double down on, business performance as a key metric. But what we found actually in reality, and there's a lot of resistance from some of our team, I was like, no, we're not here to make business just perform better. We're here to make it a better world. But what we found fascinating is that in connecting results to business performance, it actually supports people on the fence to actually do their real work. And the work itself, while it does and should improve business performance, it also does make people better because they're starting to behave more in the green zone, and not just at work. They're starting to, some of the questions, sometimes I'll ask questions to people who parents on our programs and say, do you have red zone behaviors as a parent? Wouldn't it be super useful for you to know your red zone behaviors and regulate yourself back into green zone behaviors as a human being, as a parent? And so we get a lot of amazing shifts in people's personal lives in our work, but we're starting to see a much more consistent application now that it's linked to the actual reality of the business outcomes. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Deeply appreciated, and wishing you a mindful and lovely day. Okay. I think we're All right, Julian, I'm gonna hang up. We okay to stop?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.